He won every hand and lost every bone. The dice carved from human fingers. There is a particular hunger that lives in the gambler's chest, a hollow, aching thing that no ordinary wind can fill. You've felt it maybe, that pull toward the table, the cards, the dice, the way the world narrows to a single point of possibility and you think, this time, always, this time. But there are games that were never designed for you to walk away from. Games where the house isn't a casino or a man in a suit. It's something older. Something that understood the mathematics of desperation long before numbers had names. What follows is a story of a man who found those dice, who held fate in his palm and called it luck. The bones always know what they're owed. Marcus Hale had owed money to 7 different people for so long that the debt had become a kind of weather. Ambient, oppressive, always threatening rain, but somehow never breaking. He was 43 years old with a gift for cards that had never quite outrun his gift for overreaching. And on the night everything changed, he was sitting in the back of a pawn shop on Delacorte Street with $22 in his jacket and the quiet, practiced expression of a man who had stopped being embarrassed about what he was willing to do. The game was poker. The room smelled of mildewed carpet and something else. Something mineral and faintly sweet that Marcus's nose couldn't quite categorize, but that sat in the back of his throat like copper. 5 other players at the folding table, none of them faces he recognized from the usual circuits. A woman with gray streaked braids who never blinked enough. A heavy-set man whose fingers moved constantly, tapping rhythms on his thighs. An older gentleman in a velvet jacket the color of a bruise. The gentleman in velvet placed the dice on the table during the second hand. They were small, irregular in the way that handmade things are irregular, each face carved with pips that weren't quite circles, more like little holes bored into something dense and faintly yellowed. Marcus assumed ivory at first. He was wrong. "House rules," the gentleman said pleasantly. "Before each deal, we roll. The dice tell us what the next card burn from the deck will be. If you call it right, you ante stays. If you call it wrong, you double." His smile was the kind that knew something. The dice don't lie. They never have. Marcus rolled his eyes internally. A prop. A theater piece to loosen the table's nerves. He'd seen gimmicks. He rolled the dice on his first turn. A 3 and a 4. And without thinking declared the burn card would be the 7 of clubs. The dealer turned it face up without ceremony. 7 of clubs. He felt a small charge move through him. Coincidence. He rolled again on the next deal, watched the dice settle to 2 and 5, and heard himself say, with complete and irrational certainty, "The Jack of Diamonds." The burn card was a Jack of Diamonds. By the 4th hand, Marcus had stopped questioning. The dice hummed faintly against his palm when he held them. Not a vibration exactly, more like the feeling of a word on the tip of your tongue, a knowing that bypassed the intellect entirely. He won, hand after hand. The woman with the braids began watching him very specifically. The gentleman in velvet maintained that knowing smile. Marcus didn't notice the tip of his right index finger until he stood to use the bathroom between hands and happened to look down. The top joint was gone, not bleeding, not wounded, simply absent. The skin smooth and closed at the new terminus as though it had always ended there. He flexed the finger. No pain. The absence was clean and total, the way a word vanishes from a sentence when you delete it. He sat back down. He told himself it was nothing. He told himself a lot of things in the hours that followed as the winnings mounted. The dice grew warmer in his hand. He began to feel them settle before they'd finished rolling, the answer appearing in his mind with the soft certainty of a memory rather than a guess. The pile of chips in front of him grew. His fingers grew shorter. By midnight, 3 joints were gone from his right hand. By 2 in the morning, he'd lost the tips of 4 fingers on the left as well. The skin always closed. There was never blood. The bone dust he noticed dimly, the fine pale powder that appeared each time a joint vanished, drifted sideways regardless of airflow, always in the same direction, always toward the dice. He kept playing. This is the part that is difficult to explain to anyone who hasn't felt it. The knowing. Each time he held the dice, the answer came so completely, so warmly that stopping felt like choosing to go blind. The wins felt less like luck and more like memory, like he was remembering games that had always already happened. And the money was real. The chips were real. He was winning a fortune. The gentleman in velvet never won a hand. He also never seemed to mind. Around 3 in the morning, with the winnings in front of Marcus totaling something close to $40,000 and his hands reduced to palms with stubbed, abbreviated fingers, the gentleman in velvet folded his cards and said, "I think we're nearly there." Marcus looked at his hands fully for the first time in hours. The fingers ended at the second knuckle on most of them. The bone dust on the table in front of him was a fine, pale scatter. His hands looked like something a child would draw. Mitten shapes. Functional in outline but wrong in every detail. He stood to leave. He was certain of this. He stood and reached for his winnings. And that was when the last joints went, all at once. A soft plural absence, the palms closing smoothly over what had been knuckles, and his hands became 2 smooth, rounded things that could grip nothing. The chips slid through them. He sat back down. The other players, he realized, were gone. The woman with the braids, the heavy-set man. They had left at some point he hadn't noticed. It was only Marcus and the velvet gentleman and the table and the dice, which were sitting in the center of the felt, with their faces up. The dice rolled. He hadn't touched them. They moved on their own, a short, skittering journey across the felt, and came to rest at 6 and 6. The gentleman in velvet stood and straightened his jacket. "There's always a final hand," he said, without any particular cruelty. "The dice have been patient. They've been building their count." He gestured at the empty chair across from Marcus. "Your opponent will be here shortly." Marcus opened his mouth. He meant to argue, threaten, beg. The full arsenal of a man who had spent 43 years talking his way out of consequences. What came out was nothing, because speaking requires the cooperation of a body that intends to stay, and Marcus Hale's body had already received its notice. The dice rolled again on their own, landing double 6 for the second time. The room filled with the smell of copper and that sweet, mineral something. Later, much later, when a locksmith broke into the pawn shop on Delacour Street on behalf of the landlord, she found the folding table, the scattered chips, and a set of six-sided dice carved from bones sitting in the center of the felt. Beside them, a fine pale residue in the approximate outline of a seated person, as though something dense and structural had settled there and dissolved. She also found, beneath the table, a roll of cash, a great deal of cash, more than she'd ever seen in one place, still neatly banded. She left it there. Some winnings, she understood, without knowing why, were not meant to be collected. The dice were gone the next day. A new game had been arranged in a parking garage on the far end of the city. A new player had heard about it from a man he owed money to. The table smelled of mildew and copper and something sweet. The dice sat in the center of the felt, very warm, very patient, waiting. What haunts me most about Marcus isn't the ending, it's the middle. Those hours when he could see what was happening, joint by joint, and chose to keep playing because the knowing felt too good to surrender. That's not weakness. That's a very specific kind of human architecture. We are built, most of us, to choose the extraordinary sensation over the sensible exit. The dice understood this. Whatever was carved into them, whatever intelligence lives in bone, in the compact mineral record of a human body, it knew to offer the win first. Always the win first. And the debt. Let's not overlook the debt. Marcus came to that table already owing, already in the arrangement that makes a man say yes to things he should say no to. The dice didn't create his desperation. They simply offered it a direction. The $40,000 left beneath the table was not an accident. That was a lure. That was the advertisement for the next game. There is no house edge in games like this because the house doesn't want your money. It wants the part of you that calculates, the part that holds the dice and feels the knowing. The bones remember everything they once supported, and they are endlessly interested in what you are willing to give up for one more hand. Thank you for joining me tonight. My name is Ilara, and I am your whisperer. I'll be here, waiting for you next time. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. I want to hear your stories. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more. This has been Karma Quietly Whispers. See you soon.